All right, guys, this is going to be a tutorial about our brand new Sandsheets model known as the activity matrix. What this does is essentially work as a heat map, if you're familiar with that kind of visual, to give you an idea of which networks are seeing a lot of activity compared to their normal resting average, or not a lot of activity compared to their resting average. We look at about a 3 month sample size, which is kind of a mid range uh, idea of where we're kind of standing for a lot of networks. We could have gone longer and done a full year, but crypto changes so quickly that we felt that might be a little bit excessive. And of course, 1 month or less is a little bit too soon. If an asset goes on a 2, 3, 4 week pump, it might be misleading to compare what's going on now versus something that is that short of a sample size. So 3 months was about right for us to use as kind of a 90-ish day sample size for where an asset currently stands in terms of a lot of leading metrics that we really value a lot at Santiment. In no particular order, we like to look at active addresses, network growth, whale transactions, the amount of supply held by specifically wallets with about $100,000 to $1 million in their respective wallets, social dominance, which is the percentage of discussions related to that asset versus all other assets, exchange inflow versus outflow, which is also known as exchange balance, mean dollar age, and age consumed. Now, there's a lot we can go over in terms of the importance of each of those metrics, but we'll do that more so in other videos. I'll touch on them a little bit as we go through a few examples, but if you're looking for really big explanations that are more explanatory than what I go over here, check out our other content and feel free to ask us where that content is located in case you aren't sure. But any of these metrics, I would recommend can and should be looked up basically on the Santiment Academy. If you go to academy.santiment.net, type in any of these metrics, and you'll see an explanation that kind of goes through the math, why it's important, and of course, we're available on Discord to help answer further questions on how they work and why they should matter. That being said, looking at the activity matrix here, there's a lot that's going on, and the entire point of this is kind of to be a home base for what's going on for about 115 different assets without you having to tab over between multiple pages, look at one asset at a time, look at one metric at a time, have all these templates that you need to page through, which there is merit to, but this kind of gives especially those people who are interested in swing trading and jumping from altcoin to altcoin, a huge, huge advantage. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. A big advantage when it comes to figuring out which asset to trade in or out of based on math, based on probabilities of which assets are becoming hot or becoming cold at any given time. So without further ado, let's go into the intricacies of how this works. And I'll start with the guide here. Now, when you make a copy of this model, as you do with all Sandsheets models, you can simply get the home base model, which is not this one. This is one that I made myself as a copy off of the main one that I created. Um, you can make your own, and you'll see all of these same tabs: guide, the detailed view, an anomaly view, which I'll show, the leaderboard, a table, so you can sort through the different numbers if you prefer that rather than a color-coded view, the actual assets and their market cap ranks, and then the raw data when they're pulled from the Santiment API. So for starters, you've got to be a Sandbase Pro member or be running a Sandbase trial in order for this model to effectively work for you. Otherwise, it's just going to say no data because you don't have an API connected to it. It's very easy to open a trial though, so you can try this model without having to become an official pro member right away. If you like it and you get hooked on it, like a lot of our community is, then you can actually become an official Sandbase Pro member, try paying for 1 month, and continue to use it. Also, if you've got a paid Google Suite subscription associated with your Sandbase Pro email address, your activity matrix model, like the one I'm showing, will take about 10 to 15 minutes to load. Otherwise, there's a mini version that's essentially like this, but only shows about 20 different assets instead of 115 or so. So that's kind of a mini version that will load faster if you're only on a free Google Sheets plan, which most of you watching this probably are. Most people don't get an upgraded Google Suite plan unless they have a reason to. Perhaps this could be a reason to if you think it's worth the money. Another thing I want to mention is that you should probably keep the view magnification at about 150%. It depends on your monitor, though. That's what my monitor works on best. But you can simply hold down Control and press the plus or minus, and you can zoom in, zoom out to get this grid to fit in perfectly for you. It's intended to update just once a day, mind you, so this is not something that's on an hourly basis or a minute basis. This is once per day. At the time markets close, it will give a new full day of data. That's by design, because if we did hourly and we're looking at like the total amount of network growth on the current day versus previous days, then of course, if it's only a partial day, it's not going to be a fair apples to apples comparison, and you're going to see that it's always just going to look cold if you're looking in the middle of the day, because you're looking at a 12-hour period versus all the other 24-hour periods that have already elapsed. Also, if you want to refresh, you want to make sure to go to the data tab here, and you can actually just hit delete on this cell in A1, wait maybe 10, 15 seconds, and then hit the undo button. This will force a refresh by telling all of these cells that this date needs to refresh all of the data. Trust me on that. That's the quickest way I have found that SAN API metrics can load with this Google Sheets integration for all of the SAN Sheets models we have. Sometimes there might be a little trouble refreshing. I want to warn you. We're here to help on that if it does happen. I recommend, if that backspace method right here doesn't work, simply copy the link, Control C or the Apple button C on Macs, close the tab entirely, then open a new tab and try again, pasting the URL and loading it as like a hard refresh. That really helps. And the rest I'll kind of get into as we go here so you can have a visual understanding. So I want to begin by looking through the detailed tab here. Now the detailed tab gives you multiple color-coded scales, anywhere from darkish blue to darkish red, and it should be pretty intuitive. If that particular metric, let's say we're looking at active addresses on the latest full day, which as of this recording would be December 5th, you look at it and it's a yellow square, meaning today was a pretty average day in terms of address activity for Aave. However, if you look at something like exchange inflow/outflow, it was actually a good day. And in this case, that would mean that there were a lot of coins moving off of exchanges compared to the average day for Aave. Long story short, red usually means things are hot and a little more on the bullish side of things. Blue means it's cold and a little more on the bearish side of things. However, what you want to do when you just look at a red square or blue square, you don't want to just say, okay, red means prices are going to go up. It can actually be tricky because you want to be able to pay attention to the price changes. And for each of these assets, you'll notice there are price percentages underneath the asset. The far left one is always the 1-day percentage change. Then we have the 7-day percentage change, then the 30-day percentage change, and then finally the 90-day percentage change. You'll also notice there's a color code with each of these percentages. You see that plus 6% here, for example, for AJO is very green. That means compared to all of these other assets, plus 6% was actually one of the best performing days on a 1-day time frame. Plus 42% was also one of the best performing weeks, because this is 7 days, the second square over, compared to all the other assets. And if you see something like orange or red, for example, hash flow here, it's minus 4% in the last 90 days. That's actually quite poor in comparison to most. This one's even worse. This one actually looks like it may be the worst out of all of these assets. Minus 55% return in the last 90 days is obviously very bad compared to the past 3 months of most assets, which have been on mostly quite a tear. For example, look at um, Origin, which kind of looks pretty yellow to me, meaning it's kind of a mediocre performance. But it's yellow, meaning that's kind of just a middle performing 90-day return compared to the average market cap. That's how much prices have really gone up over the last 90 days. So the color code is a good way to look at it and understand just how well the asset has been performing while it's seeing a bunch of hot squares or a bunch of cold squares, as we can see down here. Um, the reason this is important, if you're seeing that an asset is way ahead of the rest of crypto, like Merit Circle, huge returns over the past 7 days, 90 days, or 7 days, 30 days, and 90 days here. If you're seeing that it's still kind of hot, that actually could be a signal that it's going to cool down soon, because oftentimes you'll see active addresses spike when a top is forming, network growth, whale transactions, even social dominance, lots of discussion and new addresses open up when an asset has been super hot. So the best way I can explain it is, if you're trying to find good assets to open a position into, I don't recommend simply looking for the ones with the most red squares. Make sure it's one with red squares that also has not been outperforming the rest of the markets. Just to give an example, something like Numeraire looks decent right now because it has more red squares than blue. You'll notice the actual color of the title is kind of orange, meaning it's a little above its average performance. Also, by the way, the number in parentheses is the market cap rank, which when I made this a couple of months ago, it was the top 300, but some have shifted out of the top 300 ever since because the markets have been so wild. Some have moved way up, some have moved way down. That's how it goes. But just look at the market cap rank if you're curious where it stands in terms of its market cap size compared to all the other assets. So when you see the color of it, for example, Teller is kind of bluish, that means that its current day or its latest one is very cold with not a lot of good bullish indicators indicating it may turn around. Meanwhile, if something is very red, let's say we look at Yield Guild, um, huge like top days over the past 3 months for a lot of different categories here. And that indicates that it could go on a run. Now, it's kind of yellow in terms of its price performances, meaning it's performed about average compared to the rest of the field. So there could be some opportunity here where prices may grow uh, because it hasn't been outperforming and it isn't showing that it has had a lot of breakouts from the rest of the crypto markets, if that makes sense. Because a breakout is usually what makes it so that a lot of network growth suddenly comes in and active addresses and whales trying to take profits so they could go into another asset that hasn't been performing as well, if that makes sense. So, ideal way, if you're trying to find bottoms here, would be to look for underperformers that are suddenly getting hot. Hash flow looks like a decent one here. And we also have, let's say, one other example, not AJO, because you see a lot of green with their prices. That means that it's hot network right now could actually be a trap leading to a top forming. One other one, uh, we'll just say Shiba actually looks pretty decent, and that makes sense with a lot of meme coins like Pepe at the time of this recording performing quite well. And oftentimes, meme coins take turns in making a jump. So perhaps there's something brewing with Shiba Inu. Obviously, not investment advice if you're watching this right after it's released. Um, so pay attention to the price trend when you look at how hot or how cold the network actually is. Now, another more simplistic way to look at it, if you prefer, not having so many colors firing off at you and not knowing where to start, you can look at the anomalies. And the anomalies will actually show, as I get Discord notifications, sorry about that, this will actually show just when an asset has had a big anomaly in terms of like a top 3 day or bottom 3 day for that metric. So, for example, Jasmy had a huge accumulation day for its 100K to $1 million holders at the beginning of the week, last week. If you look at the current day, XRP is having a very cold day for that same metric. Um, Pax Gold is having an extremely cold day, and Mean Dollar Age, for example. So this could be a simple way if you just want to find a really hot day or a really cold day without kind of looking at so many um, in between colors. This kind of separates and just says these are the biggest and smallest days over the past 90 days. Now we can also look at the leaderboard, which is a great I think I probably use this more than the actual grids now because it simply shows what the market leaders are in terms of the one seeing the biggest anomaly for any respective category. For example, Coin98 has just had its best performing active address day in the past 90 days. Ajo has just had its best day in terms of whale transactions. That's what the 1 means. If it's a 2, that means it's the second best day. 3 is the third best day over the past 3 months, etc. And then you also have the worst performers. So, for example, UMA is getting almost no whale transactions in comparison to an average day, and that's why it's showing a 90, meaning it's 90th out of about 90 days, maybe 91 or 92, depending on how much the past 3 months have been. But you get the idea. These are all the worst performers. And if you want to just cut through it and look through the hottest and coldest networks right now, just look at the overall average rank leaders, indicating that Pepe, when you average all of these 8 metrics together, it's giving an 8.3 out of 90, which is extremely good. So long story short, these are basically the assets that are having the hottest activity compared to its past 3 months. And these are the assets having the coldest activity compared to its past 3 months. You can also just look at the price change leaders or price change losers of this group of assets in terms of 1 day, 7 days, 30 days, or 90 days. So you'll also notice that I highlighted a few examples here in bright yellow ahead of time, just for the purpose of this video. They are by default a different color than the rest of the green or the rest of the red. I just manually highlighted them so we could single them out and kind of understand them in correlation with how they show on Sandbase. So the first example here would be Basic Attention Token, which according to its ranking is having the #1 or best day in terms of network growth over its past 3 months. And if we look on the detailed tab and get some context on how its price is performing, it's pretty average, plus 0%, plus 7, plus 12, plus 43%. And they're all kind of orange or yellow, indicating that these numbers over these periods of time were not huge breakouts compared to the rest of the markets. But let's take a look at it on Sandbase, and we can see the network growth is indeed rising pretty big as the price has kind of grown. And we saw the best performing day, just as the model showed us yesterday for new addresses created. And even the day before, looks like that was the second best performing day. So that's something to look at and say, okay, there seems to be a lot of popularity with Basic Attention Token. Now it is happening on a rise, but I don't think I would call this like this huge FOMO spike that's a huge concern. It could indicate that new addresses are coming in because there's something that the BAT community knows about upcoming initiatives, or maybe there already has been an announcement that Santiment hasn't picked up on yet. Another example, going back to our leaderboard tab here, would be Litecoin, which is seeing its best day of the past 3 months in terms of social dominance, or the percentage of discussions related to LTC compared to other assets. And sure enough, we see the big spike here. About 1.27% of all discussions are about Litecoin, which is massive. compared to its normal resting average, which looks more like half a percentage or so. So, yeah, it means that there's something going on that's causing people to get much more interested in Litecoin, and that could potentially have a positive impact on price. Going back to the activity matrix and looking at Litecoin, remember they're all in alphabetical order, so it's pretty easy to find Litecoin. Yeah, it looks like all the price performances are kind of orange. So it's actually been underperforming the markets, and it's seeing all of these hot squares now, uh, indicating that the network is starting to heat up. Now, note these white rows or white columns, by the way. They indicate that there is no data on exchange inflow for Litecoin or for network growth, and that's why they're white. They're colored in white, so there's no confusion that it's being colored for whatever ranking it's supposed to be. That simply means there's no data for that specific network. But most of these assets, you'll see pretty much full data for all of the assets. And you'll even see as the data is loading how close it is to being 100% completed. So you don't make any assessments before the data has finished, by the way. So yeah, Litecoin's leaderboard entry there is notable for its social dominance. And then the last example is actually a negative one, and that's showing that Curve is seeing a major amount of coins moving to exchanges because exchange outflow would be a positive result. Exchange inflow would be a negative result because coins moving to exchanges often implies there's an upcoming sell-off to be concerned about that can tank prices. So if we look at Curve on Sandbase, sure enough, we see this huge spike here, indicating there was this huge inflow, easily the largest in the past 3 months. We could even zoom out and see that the last time we saw an inflow this big was back here in August, which was when all of the markets were kind of tanking at that moment. But something to keep in mind, especially because Curve's price has been rising as of late, there could be some mild profit taking going on that you might want to be worried about. Not investment advice. This is simply what the metrics are stating, and you can do as you will with what the data is showing. So you can look at the price performing leaders over the past 1, 7, 30, or 90 days in terms of best performers or worst performers, which we can see on the 90-day would be, plus 376% for Merit Circle or minus 55% for Acropolis. You get the idea. And then you can also look at the table, right? If you just want to sort by rankings overall, you can look at any asset and see, where they stand in terms of their rankings over the past 90 days. A 4 would mean it's the fourth best day for whale transactions, and 83 would mean it's the 83rd best day for exchange inflow versus outflow. And then, of course, we just have the assets here. So if you ever want to just change the list of assets, you can do so here. Now, mind you, the asset list is chosen based on the highest market caps for Bitcoin, XRP, I think we have Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and a few other blockchains. And then the rest, the vast majority, are going to be ERC20s because those are the types of assets where we have the full array of all of the metrics that we often talk about in our content for Santiment. So if you change it, just understand that if it's not an ERC20, it's almost certainly not going to have many metrics available for you to analyze. So I recommend just sticking with the default asset list. It's very likely, assuming it's not an obscure like asset outside the top 300, that it's already here and it's already something that will have coverage that you can analyze. So that would just be a way to modify things if you are interested in doing so. And yeah, I think that about covers it. So in terms of strategy, just to recap, look for those networks that are looking quite hot, but have not actually shown signs of a pump yet. And the best way to understand a pump is not just to look whether it's up or down, but look at where these colors stand. If they're kind of orange or, not, at least not in the green area, that means compared to the rest of the markets, that asset hasn't really outperformed in any way and could be an opportunity, assuming that it's got some red squares indicating that the network is getting extra hot as of late. And remember that the multiple rows mean you can look at anything over the past week. This is 1 week ago from the day of recording, 6 days ago, 5 days ago, 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, and then the day that just ended, less than an hour ago from the time of this recording. So I think that's a good recap of the model. I'm here to answer any questions on Discord, so feel free to ping at Brian on the Santiment Discord, and I'll be happy to help out. And I hope you enjoy using it, everyone. Cheers.